Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Talk Justice Tuesday series event. My name is Tanika Nicholas, and I'm the Justice Reform Partnership Strategist for the Southern Center for Human Rights. We're halfway through our series event for our Talk Justice series event for this year. We started off with our legislative advocacy series, and we followed up with our youth justice, juvenile life without parole last month. However, if this is your first time joining us for our Talk Justice Tuesday series, just to give you a little bit of background for the Justice Reform Partnership, we are a coalition of 80 or more individuals and organizations working towards criminal justice reform here in Georgia, where we prioritize our work around prison conditions, reentry efforts, and youth justice. We host our Talk Justice Tuesday series events during our legislative session to give our community members, activists, our lawmakers, an opportunity to have more intimate conversations around issues that are affecting those who are in the criminal legal system. Tonight, we'll be deep diving more into conversations around prison conditions, more specifically about conditions of confinement. Personally, for myself, for someone who served 10 years in a Georgia State prison, I know all too true about the conditions in a Georgia State prison. So we do have a panelist of experts here tonight, and the conversation is going to be led by my coworker, Waleisah Wilson, who is our client services advocate at Southern Center for Human Rights. She's going to lead our conversation about prison conditions in our local jails and in our state prisons. Hello. But just a reminder that if you weren't able to join us for our two previous events, we do have those recordings updated on our website, and we'll share that in the chat with you shortly. But I'm going to turn it over to Waleisah, and she's going to moderate our event tonight. She's going to introduce our panelists. And if you have questions, though, we do have a tab for Q&A. We do want you all to put your questions in the Q&A tab, and we will have time at the end of the event to answer your questions. Waleisah?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Waleisah Wilson, and I am the Client Services Advocate here at Southern Center for Human Rights, where I support our clients in their reentry. I am a member also of the JRP, serving in the capacity of my nonprofit that I started after my release from prison in 2011. New Life Second Chance Outreach, which is a Georgia nonprofit that serves as a reentry navigation hub that provides background-friendly resources to Georgians impacted by a criminal record. The mission of Southern Center is to work for equality, dignity, and justice for people impacted by the criminal legal system in the Deep South. SCHR fights for a world free from mass incarceration, the death penalty, criminalization of poverty, and racial injustice. One of the three key issues that we address is ending mass incarceration is prison conditions. The Deep South's addiction to incarceration is not just a reflection of higher crime rates or a stronger commitment to public safety. To the contrary, the overuse of incarceration as a solution to addiction, mental illness, and poverty has caused a number of serious problems. The level of overcrowding in prisons and jails throughout the South is inherently dangerous. Prisons and jails compromise public health systems by making people sicker and disrupting care. And conditions inside prisons and jails are often contribute to the creation of a culture of violence and abuse that extends beyond the prison walls. Violence, guard brutality, draconian conditions of solitary confinement, extreme heat, poor medical care, and intolerable living conditions have all been challenged in litigation brought by Southern Center for Human Rights. Now, before introducing our panelists, I want to give a disclaimer about language. Although the media, society, and sometimes ourselves continue to define justice-involved people by our behavior, charges, or experiences with the system, and not by our humanity, it is my request to you that you change that by not using derogatory terms that dehumanize us during this event, as well as going forward. Therefore, when speaking about people who are impacted by the system, we do not use terms like felon, offender, ex-con, convict, inmate, prisoner, etc. But person who is incarcerated or person who is in jail, person with a felony. To better support you on your journey of using language that humanizes us as opposed to harming us, we'll be dropping a few resources in the chat to help you support with using more supportive and humanizing language. Now, what we have come here for. Before we meet our panelists, I want to share with you just a few images of the conditions that incarcerated people in Georgia, throughout the South, and the country are forced to experience. Regardless of what someone may or may not have done, no one deserves to live like the images that you are about to see. Therefore, viewer discretion is advised, as the images are not only heartbreaking, but disturbing. Now, these are just a few images of the prison conditions at a few Alabama prison cells. As you can see, the walls have paint peeling off of them. Just the floors are filthy. Even the little hole in the door that people are passed their food in is nasty. So even at the top of the ceiling, I would assume that's lead. I mean, this is something that can cause folks to get sick. So these are just some of the images of the places that people have to live in every day. This is in the South Fulton jail. The little bitty thin mat that's there, and just the conditions of the floor and how cold it is, and someone being placed outside in solitary confinement. These are just the small spaces that folks have to live with. This picture is shot is of women who are incarcerated here in Georgia who were forced to stay outside while it rained. And as you can see in the lower left picture, it's apparently storming and humid while women are standing outside in the rain. And these are our mothers and our sisters and our cousins. These are our loved ones who are having to deal with this. Now, in 2022, most of you may have recalled that there was a Facebook plea from a family for help for their incarcerated brother. And according to the post, they simply said, facility, I'm coming to you right now based on my brother's health. My brother's health is rapidly declining. As you can see in these photos, he is extremely malnourished. In these particular photos, he cannot walk nor stand. He is weak and vulnerable. My last visitation with my brother was July of 2022. He was in good condition. I am not a doctor, but his health seems to be deteriorating. I received 2 pictures of him today saying, get help. I'm asking for you to simply share and get these pictures out. This is violating human rights. I don't see how you cannot get help when an individual is in this state. And they ask everybody to tag news stations and anybody. So this is literally a plea of one family asking for advocacy on behalf of their brother. Now, the next photo that I'm going to show you is a side-by-side shot of what he looked like when he first got there and what he looks like now. And this is a 32-year-old man. Now, as you all know, that when you're in prison, you have to fight. Sometimes you are targeted for violence and things like that. This man is completely vulnerable. There is nothing he would be able to do if somebody was to attack or come at him. And just look at the beds behind him on the left picture of how folks are living. But to know that he was in there, when you're in prison, it is the prison's responsibility to take care of your health and needs. Regardless of what they may think of you, they're not supposed to allow you to be like that. And this was just awful. And this was in 2022. Now, this is a story that just came out this month of an individual here in Georgia that died after being left in a cell for 3 hours. They knew he was in there and they refused to get him out and did not get him out. And it was ruled a homicide. And although this was recorded in a $5 million settlement, that is absolutely nothing, considering the fact that that is the value of a family losing their loved one. And so I just wanted you all to just see some of the images, just a few of the images that individuals who are currently incarcerated have to deal with while they're incarcerated. And these are not just men, these are women, these are youth. Youth facilities are just as horrible. So thank you all so much for watching that, and but we wanted you all to be able to see what we have to live with when we are incarcerated, when we are supposed to be under the care of other individuals who are supposed to be taking care of us. So forcing people to live in horrible jail and prison conditions is no secret. So you can search all over the internet for disturbing images and videos of how our loved ones are being treated by people who are charged with their safety and care. And so a couple of videos are being dropped in the chat. When you get a time, look at them. And when you look at them, I hope you get mad at looking at them. And I hope you take action to do what you need to do to hold folks here in Georgia and whatever state you're zooming in from, accountable for their actions. So now we will introduce our panelists and our experts. Thank you so much for joining us after hours to talk about prison conditions here in Georgia. Our first guest we'll be asking is Kristen Wilder. She's an investigator and paralegal working in the Impact Litigation Unit of Southern Center with over 8 years of experience in the criminal legal field. She spends her time working extensively with the conditions of Georgia's jail and prisons. Before coming to Southern Center, Kristen served as the policy manager for the Georgia House of Representatives Minority Caucus during the 2023 legislative session and began her career as an intern with the Georgia Department of Corrections. Kristen received her Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice at Georgia State University and is currently pursuing a graduate degree in Political Science at Georgia State. Welcome, Kristen. Our next guest is Drew Umberger. She's a formerly incarcerated community leader who currently works with underserved communities by helping them increase their quality of life by connecting them with access to better health and mental care and addressing substance use disorders and food insecurities while working towards the long-term goal of permanent housing. She is a full-time care navigator for Policing Alternatives and Diversion Initiative here in Atlanta, better known as PAD, and is an active member of organizations that work to effect positive change in the area of juvenile and adult criminal justice. Welcome, Drew. Our last and final guest is Dominique Harris. He is a self-proclaimed community journalist, commentator, and advocate who just happens to be formerly incarcerated. He amplifies the voices of the community through his writing and mentorship. He works at youth diversion programs as a mentor and group facilitator. He also served as an accountability and support partner for returning citizens and justice-impacted individuals. Dominique's journey is marked by a continuous effort to enhance his journalism and communication skills, aiming to articulate issues in ways that resonate across various layers of language and culture. His approach not only reflects the aspirations of his community, but also bridges the gap in understanding complex social factors. He currently works as the outreach associate at Georgia Justice Project. Welcome, Dominique, and welcome, Kristen and Drew. Thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to start with our very, very first question. Kristen, I know you do a lot of work with the Georgia prison system, so I wanted to ask you a question. How do you think that the privatization of medical and mental health care impact a person's incarceration experience?
Hi, thank you. I think it impacts it greatly because we start to see where people will cut costs and cut corners to save money in exchange for quality health care. And so, for example, up until 2022, I believe, Georgia had public health care through Augusta Medical. The whole system did. And then they decided to go and have a contract with, I believe it's WellPath, is who they have currently. WellPath, just to give you an example of what that looks like in Georgia, between their founding in 2003 and the latest number I saw was 2018, between that time, they have had over 1,400 lawsuits for malpractice, for patient injury, and for wrongful death. That is who Georgia is currently contracted with to give care to our incarcerated persons. That same company was investigated by CNN in 2019. That same company was a subject of legislators, senators at the end of 2023, calling for the end of private medical care in prison that was led by Elizabeth Warren. So when you think about this, and to put it in perspective, there was another study done by Reuters where by 2018, the amount of American jails that were using private medical care had rose to over 60%. In those same jails, when they did a comparative study of the jails and facilities and prisons that had this private care versus those who had public care through a government agency, it was between 18 and 58% more likely. Those facilities were 18 and 58% more likely to have deaths in those facilities. So when you think about the privatization of care, it quite literally is life or death, because we're looking at private people and private companies who aren't held to the same government standard. Their accountability and transparency isn't held to the same standard that we would if it was, controlled by a government agency. And they're literally choosing to cut costs over giving quality care. And what that looks like on the flip side, when I go into prisons or jails and speak to people beyond the numbers, in regular conversation, I always find out that someone requested something medically related over a year ago, and they've been waiting for over a year just to get an appointment, or over a year or over 6 months just to go and see a doctor. So that's what that actually looks like, not just in the statistics, but what's happening in our actual prison system with these private companies.
Thank you. And again, it's all about profit. And so when people start putting profit over people, it's a problem. Thank you so much for that. So the next question is going to go to Dominique. Now, I know, Dominique, we saw some images, very horrible images. And then we also dropped some links in the chat as it relates to prison violence. I wanted to ask you, can you speak a little bit about prison violence and what practices or steps can be implemented or taken to effectively ensure the safety of other incarcerated people and staff?
Prison violence, and just in short, is just traumatic. I can think about some of the things I've seen, and you can think something as simple as a fist fight that it's not going to stop until basically someone is beat until they can't anymore. So, and I'm not even talking about as far as the daggers and butcher knives that they have. So just thinking about that, I thought I was prepared for this question a little bit, but just thinking about it is traumatic, because it's a norm. Because if you don't think it's a norm, you haven't adapted to your situation, if that makes sense. So in short, it's just a very traumatic scene, and it's grotesque, and it's all influenced by unbalanced sentences. You have a lot of young guys coming in with maybe life sentences, meeting these older guys with longer life sentences that may have been in this long period of time. So you have these generational clashes, and it's a survival of the fittest type mindset, and it's just a plan for disaster because it's a world inside of a world, if that makes sense. And it's all, I don't want to say orchestrated by the guards, but a guard can choose not to participate or help. A guard can choose to, lock someone in a room with someone else, or not break up a fight, whether that's gang affiliation, whether that's because they're scared for their own life. So prison violence is something that it's a serious problem, because just thinking about it give me chills. I don't want to even explain some of the stuff I've seen as far as blood and grotesque stuff, but as far as what we can do about it, I really feel it's a critical thinking situation where you have a lot of guys coming in, whether they're educated or not, but you're trapping them in a stressful environment, and you're adding more stressors, whether that be limited food, limited resources, the conditions, whatever they may be, and it's exploding on them, and they don't have critical thinking skills already. So I really feel if these same classes that the states say that they offer were led by formerly justice impacted individuals that have went through that process that can help these guys with their critical thinking and help them with this adversity that they're facing, not being able to deal with that adversity, those stressors that's on top of stressors, because the state is not necessarily trying to rehabilitate, but trying to force you to correct the behavior, if that makes sense. The
It makes a
rehabilitation
lot of
part,
sense.
yeah, so it's like a forced correction instead of the rehabilitation. Like, I'm a soul, I'm not an animal. You can't beat me into submission. That's just gonna make me be violent to my peers. So that leads more to the violence. So my solution, if it is a solution, is just more impact from us, like the justice impacted, because we've been through it. We understand like what's going on behind those walls and on the outside of the walls, like collaborating with specialists, whether that be in mental health and social work and criminal justice experts, and just coming together and all being stakeholders, because something is not working, and it's just going to take a collective effort to try to figure out what's going to work.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Dominique. And I never want to ever put us in a position where we're answering questions where we feel like we ever have to be triggered. So if I ever ask you a question that's going to trigger anything, you just let me know and tell me to hold up. But I also want to say too, I feel like one of the biggest solutions to stop prison violence is the filth. I think when you're at home, I definitely know I live with somebody that when it is not right in the house. As meanwhile, I mean, if you're in a house that's filthy, nasty, you're not being fed right, getting sick from mold, your behavior would definitely change as well. So that's definitely a solution too. Thank you so much. So my next question goes to Drew. And a lot of times when we think about people in prison, we always think about men, but we do not really understand the effect that there are women, also youth, who are living in these horrible, horrible situations. And not just women, pregnant women. So as a woman who was pregnant and gave birth in prison, can you tell us about some of the unethical and inhumane conditions that women and or pregnant women endure when it comes to getting proper prenatal care, adequate nutrition, and access to feminine hygiene products? You're muted.
I am
There you
muted.
go.
Okay. Actually, thank you, Waleisah. I can speak on a lot of those subjects that you just were talking about. Just to give you an idea of what it's like for a pregnant woman. So day one, when what they call touchdown on state property, when you arrive to the prison, you literally do 8 weeks worth of diagnostic in like 5 hours. So that means they do your mental health, they do your pap smear, they do your entire physical, everything. That takes them 8 weeks to do normally, 6 to 8 weeks. They do it in like 5 hours. So you can probably imagine how unthorough they are, right? So the next morning you are shipped to Helms, which is a medical facility that houses women and men who are sick, pregnant women. I will say that reading on the back of a blister pack, we were given expired prenatal vitamins. The food is like, they cook it down so much that it cooks all the nutrients out of it. We're not given very many healthy options, like on the store and whatnot, because with the food that they give you is just not enough for a regular woman who's not pregnant. So imagine having that lack of nutrition for a woman who is pregnant, right? So there's not many healthy options. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking back. We see the doctor every week. So one time I was having really extreme excruciating pain, and I kept complaining to the doctor. It was hurting right in the center, right below my breastbone. So they took me and another woman for ultrasound. Come back, I was told that I just had acid reflux and she had gallstones. So they gave her the proper medication for the gallstones, gave me Pepsid or Protonic, something like that. Turns out a year later, I was the one with the gallstones. She never had any gallstones. So anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. So obviously they don't really take the time to really care for you. They the day that you go to give birth is probably the worst day of my entire sentence. I was, I'm used to these other officers, as strange as it may seem. I was used to this group, one set of officers, and all of a sudden I'm taken to a hospital and dropped off and given to a whole new set of officers that I've never met before in my life. The state of Georgia, if you've ever had a cesarean, it is mandatory that you have another cesarean. VBAC is not even an option, where a VBAC is optional for women in the free world. So if you're in the Department of Corrections, you've had a cesarean, it is mandatory that you have another one. You have no say in it. So they scheduled this cesarean for me. I'm surrounded by doctors that I've never met before, nurses that I've never seen, officers that I've never met either. Taken into this room, and they cut me open, and here I have him, and then I have my beautiful baby. I have 2 hours with this precious baby. I am taken away, or she's taken away rather, and they take her to the NICU unit, the IC unit for babies. I guess that's, kind of like where they're locked away, in a sense. And the women are taken to the basement. You were taken to a basement, and I was there for 3 days, was not able to bathe. The handles to the tub was removed. The window, they had male trustees looking in on me whenever they felt like it. I was, when they moved me from the hospital bed that I gave birth to the regular bed, the bed that doesn't roll, I'm busted wide open. A male sergeant is watching the entire thing. I'm being cleaned off by these nurses in front of the male sergeant. They asked the male sergeant to leave the room, and he was like, I can't do that. So I'm busted wide open, and they're cleaning me off, and my dignity was just gone. And all I kept thinking about was this precious baby. You're supposed to get 2 hours every shift with your newborn. They use the COVID, or what do they say? Short staffed. So we can't make it this time. You can't see your baby this shift. And then all of a sudden you're just taken away. And can I say bye to my baby? No, it's in your best interest that you don't say goodbye to your baby. How do you know it's in my best interest, right? So they take you back to the main prison. I was put into a room now mind you, I had cesarean. I was placed into a room at medical with another woman who had MRSA staph. She had a staph infection. I was scared to death. Here I am with this open wound. She's got staph. She's touching everything. I asked for a single room. I even asked to go to lockdown that day. And yeah, so there you are, and you're in medical, and you're with this other person, and they just don't care about your health in general. I firmly believe that I have Crohn's disease because of the lack of nutrition, the lack of medical care there. I had my gallbladder removed. All of my medical surgeries that I had when I was released from prison, found out they were on my credit. The Department of Correction had actually charged me for all of that, even though I was a ward of the state and they get funding for that. They still charged me for it in the end of the day. So for a woman giving birth, it's just not ideal. It's there needs to be a better way. There has to be a better way to do that, because it's just not natural to be a newborn taken from their mother within 2 hours. They have a breast pump for officers to use at every prison, at every woman's prison. Why can't the women who have given birth have the option to breastfeed and to give their milk to their baby? That's another problem that I see that could be problematic. It's just not fair. It's just not right.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you for your transparency. And no woman should have to go through that, especially a mother. And when you say what's the problem is they're just the loss of compassion. I don't know why people feel that as correctional officers, you can't be a good human and a corrections officer at the same time. They can indeed be synonymous. And to be honest with you, if you really truly want to make an impact, you could be a corrections officer that could change the life of a person. But it never fathoms me how these CEOs treat people so horribly wrong. And it completely goes over their head that one day they'll be there. And if we've been noticing in the news, a lot of them have been landing right next to the same people that they have treated poorly. So part of the problem is they don't see us as human, and a lot of people get a little authority and they just lose their mind. So unfortunately, these are things that need to change, and it hurts more people than it helps. And so I hate you had to go through that, but I thank you and appreciate you for your advocacy in this space and voicing your experience to help other folks and bring light to the issues. Kristen, I want to ask you, so since Dominique talked about, some of the things that could change some of the prison fights, how can alternative methods be implemented to address disciplinary issues without resorting to solitary confinement? What can be done without solitary confinement being the only go-to?
Thank you. So for starters, when I think about a question like this, you have to be practical. And I've looked at other states to see what they've done, because some states are, trying to make headway with getting rid of solitary confinement altogether. And one legislation in particular happened in New York. 2022 was called the HALT Solitary Confinement Act, which stands for Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement. And one of the things they suggested was to start giving additional out of cell time to individuals who need to be in isolation. If I'm not mistaken, isolation can happen up to 23 hours a day, maybe 1 hour out of the cell. So what they're doing to kind of trickle down on the use of, or the need for solitary confinement, and to hopefully getting rid of it altogether, is increasing the out of cell time, and then also decreasing the amount of days that someone needs to spend in solitary confinement. And I think one part of the bill was, if someone needs to spend longer than, if I'm not mistaken, 15 days in solitary confinement, they get sent to what's called a residential rehabilitation unit. Which is a unit tailored specifically to their individual person, to whatever issues they're dealing with, whether it's substance abuse or anger or whatever is happening. And so another place that's trying this actually in action is the Washington Department of Corrections. They recently partnered with the Vera Institute to try to implement something similar in their correctional facilities by creating something called transition pods to reintegrate people. So what that means is incarcerated persons will still get like a TV, be able to come out of their cell and have human interaction. They're not locked away for 23, 24 hours in a day for long stretches of time and days and weeks. And also there's a need to expand and invest in our prison programming as well. I think there's a huge need for that, especially in Georgia. And to have specialized medical caregivers, like, something for a cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that. Individual specialized care that is tailored to that specific person. I think right now Georgia operates in a very one size fits everybody kind of manner when it comes to the prison system. And clearly that is not true. One size does not fit everyone. Everyone is different. Everyone is struggling with different things. So I think the best way to approach it without solitary confinement is to approach on an individual basis and acknowledge that people are human beings and they have different things going on, even if they have similar or were accused of similar crimes. They are individuals and they're having their own experience, and addressing anything disciplinary should be personable to that experience for correction, for rehabilitation, and not just throwing someone away for 23 hours or 24 hours for days at a time, and then wondering why that's not working.
Because the lack of common sense is astounding. I mean, yeah, that's all that is. Thank you so much for that, Kristen. So the next question, we're going to go to Dominique. And Dominique, what role does inhumane living conditions, and I think I touched on this earlier, what roles does just the nasty conditions, overcrowding, no air, heat, inadequate foods, not being able to get your visitations and your call contribute to violence? Now, one of the issues that caused some violence when I was in prison, when they cut out smoking, but I guess that I'm serious, that causes a lot of problems. So what do you think the inhumane conditions and overcrowding, how do you think that they are contributing to the prison violence?
Well, even though I don't think it's the greatest coping mechanism, all those smoking can help alleviate some of those things, like because they all stressors. And when you already, I understand solitary confinement in the hole, but a lot of times the camp not that different, much different from the hole. Like it might be cooler in the hole. Like I'm not even gonna lie, it might be a little cooler back there. So just the depressing thought of everything is gray. Like it can be something as simple as the colors, like just gray and white colors all the time, always a dreary mood, always a depressing scenery. And it feels like it gets on the officers too. Like it feels like they don't think you're gonna do better. Like it's like a negative cloud that's just over the whole prison or institution. Situation where all these colors are dreary, the whole attitude is bad. Someone is not getting support from their family, and they got 20 years, and they go into a shower, and it's mold, mildew, and maybe even feces everywhere. Like, and that's an area for disaster. Like you're going to explode eventually. And I look at myself, and I don't know. I ask myself, is something wrong with me because I got so normal? It became so normal to me. Like I had to do it. It is what it is. Like, okay, somebody come get this up. Like, and it's just weird, like the things that I got accustomed to. And I can see now how like poverty, how people live in filth. Like they grow up in filth and they keep living in filth. And I seen that in there. Like it just creates a sense of depression or atmosphere of depression and anxiety, and it just makes you want to give up. Why go to education or why try to get a trade? Like the situation, no one is motivating you. The officers are not, like you said, the not just the environment, but it all is kind of related to each other, from the colors to the food to the atmosphere they only come spray the showers once a month when it's over 90 men that take showers here, but you only come clean the showers once a month. So we have to over clean with bleach and maybe even knock ourselves out because the guys that do want to be able to cleanly, and that might lead to violence. And it's just a big on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other. So I can't say the higher the security level, the less they seem to care, because as my security level dropped, it seemed like the conditions got a little better. But why does it have to be like that? Like the ones that are at most risk, or I would say those that are closed security or max security, are the ones that are at severe mental health issues. They have severe mental health issues. Like they need the most help. So why would you make their conditions worse? And because it's all my justice impacted people on this call know that there's an energy there, like push the button to make you pop, because this is what's going to get you ready for society. Like that don't make sense. Like, because a lot of times this is why people rebelled against society, because someone's trying to push them a certain way. So why not help me rehabilitate? Why not help me think critically? Because that's what it's all about, critical thinking. But the conditions, they really contribute to depression and violence. If I had to say two things, depression and violence.
Thank you so much for that. Jessica, I can recall a time when I was there, and as women, I don't understand why they feel that women have the same needs as men, because we don't. There would be a time, I think I was actually incarcerated with a woman, and just me, myself, as a woman who was not pregnant, they would only give you one tampon and one pad a day. The pregnant women got the same thing. So I wanted to find out, which is awful because I'm sure their wife at home goes through more than that. But what practices or policies do you think the state needs to implement to ensure that incarcerated women in general get what they need to take care of themselves as far as their hygiene, as well as also for pregnant women to be able to have healthy babies?
Well, I feel like I don't know if this could happen, but for the ones who do have the family support, if they could have their family purchase real prenatal vitamins that aren't expired, or vitamins in general, or if the state can make it mandatory where pregnant women got good vitamins and got extra health care. And for the women that aren't pregnant, I feel like, like, again, if they're for women who have support, if they could put pads and tampons on the store, and then maybe they could purchase them that way. It's sad that it's not, you would think that locking women up and housing so many women, you would think they would know that a woman's natural menstrual, something that your body naturally does, is going to need some products, right? There needs to be more. There needs to be, instead of money in the budget for extra security or for extra this, they need to put funding into feminine products. And it's sad that we have to tell them that.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't have to tell them to provide tampons and pads.
And these are the things you need when you are incarcerating women. It's sort of the same thing when you're incarcerating someone that has cancer. They have to go to chemo. When you're incarcerating someone who has kidney failure, they have to go to dialysis. But yet they get folks in there who are diabetic and don't give them their diabetic medication. You get men who have folks who have cancer and don't take them to chemo. I actually went in with a need to have back surgery and shots in my back, did not get it. So it's no different when you get a woman. It's not like all of a sudden she gets behind bars and she no longer is going to need pads. These are things that you need. And when you're having to resort to use pillowcases and towels or things like that to take care of yourself.
Creative.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to do that. And me personally, they should not have to be purchased on the store. They should be given free.
Yes.
Because part of the problem is when you arrest people, you are now taking on the responsibility to say that we are going to take care of this person's care. So do we want to get an individual who is a trans woman who requires their medication while they're still in prison? Because you're required to do that. Do we want to get a person who's diabetic who is going to require their insulin? If you don't, you do not need to lock them up. So and that's part of the problem. So thank you so much for that. And you shouldn't have to ask. It's like one of those questions you shouldn't have to ask. So Kirsten, I wanted to ask you, we've talked about alternative methods and we talked about the privatization. How can the state address the challenges of overcrowding humanely and effectively? Like, what are they doing now that they're not doing right? And what could they do to do it more humanely and effectively?
What are they doing now that they're not doing right? Besides all of it?
Yeah, as far as addressing the overcrowding.
I mean, honestly, they're locking people up too much and for next to nothing. I think that Georgia has two problems: over prosecution and over criminalization. We're arresting people for things they probably don't need to be arrested for, like your low level drug offenses. Like, I would even go as far as saying something like public intoxication. Give them a ginger ale, an aspirin, and an Uber home. You don't have to lock people up for every little thing. And in lieu of bills that just passed, like SB 63 earlier, where, an additional 30 offenses now are going to require a cash bail, where if you're not a bail bond company, you can only bail out 3 people per year. Things like that need to be reversed because it is only going to exacerbate a problem and an issue with overcrowding. You're essentially criminalizing people for being poor, for not being able to afford it. And I'll never forget, Representative Willis said on the House floor today that one of the most expensive things to be in Georgia is poor. And it made so much sense to me. But when you consider things like that, you have to look at where Georgia's standing is. Georgia is number 4 in our entire country for the highest incarceration rate in the country. Georgia's number 4. We lock people up. And then we keep them on supervision, you know, parole, probation. 28% of the people in Georgia jails right now are there because of a supervision violation, whatever that is, something to do with probation, parole. Over half of the people in jail right now are there pre-trial. We don't need to keep people incarcerated. So the best way to address overcrowding is to stop locking people up for things they don't need to be locked up for. Invest in alternatives and community programming, like investing more in our mental health hospitals so that people aren't just sitting in jail because there's not an available bed at the Georgia Regional Hospital for them to get, you know, for them to get treatment. We need to look at things like our mandatory minimum laws, our 3 strikes and 2 strike laws, why this last legislative session, this current one last year, and really since the Kemp administration, we've been looking and finding ways to enhance penalties, to make things that were misdemeanors as felonies now. We need to revise our sentencing guidelines, and we need to start, like I said earlier, treating people like human beings. If they are having an issue that can be corrected with, you know, like a drug court, an accountability court, or rehab, or a mental health facility, then let's invest in those things and invest in increasing bed space so that we can address what people need without leaving them incarcerated and exacerbating their problems, knowing that the state isn't taking care of them. And I mean, that's really it. We just need to stop putting people in jail for things that don't matter, for things that can easily be solved if we were investing in education and in our healthcare and mental health. We don't need to keep locking people up just for the sake of locking people up and being tough on crime.
Thank you so very much. And then since you mentioned that, Georgia they just passed a bill, right, that will further criminalize people. And of course, I'm sure that's to also punish folks at Cop City, but they just added 30 new offenses that will qualify as misdemeanors to put people in jail for things that really normally would not even call for jail time. And this is why privatization becomes an issue. You're literally like Alabama, you're just getting people for cattle because you're seeing them as money. For everybody that is in that bed, they make money off of it. And so this is why when people say, why slavery is illegal? No, it's not. And this new bill that they just actually passed out is going to cause more overcrowding. It's going to cause more people to be locked up for offenses that they should not be locked up. And not only that, it's now going to punish people for bailing out at least 3 people. If you bail out more than 3 people in a year, you will now get a misdemeanor. And so what this is doing now is targeting these organizations, churches who actually do Black Mama bailouts, Juneteenth bailouts. If Dominique wanted to bail out 3 of his homeboys in a year, if he goes to the 4th one, now you done got a misdemeanor. So this is all an attack of stopping people to get people out of jail, because Georgia needs to put people in jail. And people ask why? Because it is legal. Slavery is still legal. According to the 13th Amendment, it is in there. Slavery is legal when you're convicted of a crime. And this is what people ask. And there are incentives. I know from where I'm from in Columbus, you get like maybe $45, $50, up to $75 a day for every individual that comes into the jail. So when you say, well, why officer, you could have just given me a citation for that. They're not gonna give you a citation when they can get money for you. You know, same reason why they're using incarcerated people's labor. Why would they pay you $25 on the outside to be a landscaper when they can get a slave to do it for free? It's all about money. And if they got to spend money to get mold off the wall and fix air, that's less money out of their pockets. So it's all about money. So thank you so very much about that.
And I just want to piggyback on that real quick, because one thing you mentioned about the or being able to bail out only 3 people. What wasn't in that bill, who that doesn't apply to, who can bail out more than 3 people, are private bail companies. Yeah, they have free range to continue doing what they're doing. So if you ask me, that part of the bill was cutting out the competition and
Yeah,
making
that's
it
all
so
that
they're
is.
getting as much money as they possibly can get from.
And I can imagine the people who support when we're up there. A couple years ago, I was in Columbus for city council saying we want to end cash bail in Columbus. The main folks who opposed and could not stand me were bail companies.
Absolutely.
Bail companies make $80 billion a year off of bodies that they're bailing people out for. So of course they don't want the cash bail. So I wouldn't imagine some of those people got their hands in some those private stocks and that money. So of course they're going to block it. Thank you so much. So I wanted to ask a question. And since I spoke about that, let's ask Drew. Drew, since you were recently featured in a documentary that I filmed last year about ending slavery in prison, and you talked about prison labor, where you mentioned the poor conditions that incarcerated slave laborers endure. Can you speak a little bit about your experience as a slave of the state and of the inhumane conditions in which you and others were forced to work?
Sure. So once all of my holds were lifted and I was cleared to go beyond the gate, I was taken out of educational opportunities for trade schools and whatnot, and told that I was now been reassigned by classification to outside detail. I had no choice. I had to do it or I would go to lockdown. These details would include picking up trash. Filthy, just maggots. All we had were these little thin little gloves, women's sanitary napkins or whatever they were using to clean themselves. We were given like green bologna. We were working in extreme elements. I'm talking so hot. And Learingdale State Prison in Alto, Georgia. It gets so hot and it also gets really cold. So we would work in all extreme elements, no questions asked. We were going. Officers would sit in their van with their heat or their air on, depending on the weather, and just watch us for hours. We were given a bologna sandwich and an orange every day without fail. Bologna half the time was green, like I mentioned. There were sometimes when we were all given peanut butter sandwiches, and the people who had a peanut allergy, it didn't matter. Like, this is what we had, eat it or don't. It doesn't matter to me. So it was traumatic. It was a lot of hard work for nothing. They're saving a ton of money by working the people inside the prisons. Tons of money, and they're cutting out of their own community's pockets. These community members in these small towns could actually be working, and these could be their jobs, but no, they want to save money and make the people inside do all the heavy work.
Yeah, and I think, and I often want to clarify. I think a lot of times, because I think we say the same thing as saving money, and that's actually what Columbus does. Columbus actually turns out the most incarcerated people in a day, which is around 600 folks, and that's what they say. We save money when we use slaves. We save money when in fact you do not save money, because of the fact that when folks are unemployed, crime goes up, homelessness goes up. So in fact, you're not saving money at all. What you are actually doing, like you said, is you're contributing to unemployment in your own community. So I have to tell people all the time, and they say, well, I don't think we need to end it. You go to prison, you do the time. Prison, for one, is the sentence. It doesn't say in my paper when I got sentenced that I was supposed to be a slave working somewhere for free when I had children at home that needed clothes. Somebody was taking care of my children that needed some money to help feed them. Nowhere in my sentence did it say I was supposed to go work somewhere for 16 hours a day with a rotten apple and a hot bowl of water. That's not what my sentence said. But when people say that, prison is the punishment. The fact that I'm away from society, away from my family, that's the punishment. What you should be wondering about is why you've gone to school in construction or painting or landscaping, and why you can't get a job in your own city making $30 an hour. You should be mad that they'd rather use a slave than hire you. Now you're standing in the unemployment line because you can't get a job in the field and the trade that you want because they'd rather use incarcerated folks. And don't get it twisted. Incarcerated people do more than manual labor. They're teachers. They work in the clerk courthouses. They work for Verizon, answering your phone when you're calling to try to get your bill paid. They work at Victoria's Secret. Huh?
Peach Path.
Peach Pass. They work at IKEA Furniture. They working at Starbucks. These, when I say working, meaning they're making your cups for that $9 cup of coffee that you're making. They're making that mattress you're sleeping on. Incarcerated people they contribute $12 billion a year in services and labor. And in the state of Georgia are not paid anything, but are expected to get out and try to thrive, and while at the same time taking jobs away from folks in the community. And these are jobs that they're doing, but when they get out and go to Starbucks won't hire them because they got a felony. Okay, a felony ain't bothered you for the past 20 years. You've been working me like a slave with this same felony. So thank you so much for that, Drew. I get hot when I talk about it. So I dropped it in the chat. If y'all get a chance, please watch the film. I think it'll really open your eyes and enlighten you on some of the things that are going on. Dominique, I wanted to ask you, a lot of people don't believe it because they say prison is where the criminals are. But how do COs and other prison staff contribute to prison violence and the bringing of contraband? And what practices do you think need to be implemented in holding them accountable? Since all the folks in prison and the criminals are the ones that's in orange.
I know a lot of the COs that I knew were gang affiliated. So they were setting up things or allowing things to happen, or they call themselves being neutral, turning a blind eye. So those people are from those neighborhoods and environments. Like the prison is the source of income in a lot of those towns. So a lot of those men and women are from those communities. So they have ties to people that have got locked up from those communities. And as we know, gangs, that web travels. So yes, they are very much included in layman's term, the BS that is involved in prison violence and the streets of prison, like that we would say, because it is a world inside of a world. And the second point, it goes back to it being the world. I didn't see too many incarcerated individuals bringing in stuff like that comes from the guards. Like the stuff that comes in comes from the guards,
Like
and
COVID.
that go. That's funny. For real, that is true too. Exactly.
Yeah, they
right.
brought the COVID in.
That is true too. But yeah, so most of the contraband, not in my opinion, but I know it's factual, comes from the guards. And I know that's hard to believe, but all you gotta do is look at your own society. We live in a capitalist society. Most of these people are making under 40K a year working in these prisons institutions. And you have these people coming in here, like I'm talking about the incarcerated individuals. Yeah, they got caught, but that don't mean like they don't still have money. So they're coming in here and it's capitalism and then becomes a different world and it's very corrupt. It goes from CO to warden. I know a couple of wardens that have got caught up in rackets of bringing stuff in and letting stuff happen, knowing how their camp is ran, basically turn the blind eye. So nothing happens, I feel like looking back at it without the knowledge of the warden. Like all the contraband, I done had wardens come in and say, I know what y'all got. Work out a deal with me. Just don't kill each other. Like it's real. So it's that's the part of it. It's a world inside of a world. It's just a racket. It's corrupt. That's what happens when it's not based on rehabilitation. It's privatized and based on profit. Like no one is really getting rehabilitated. I really think that the justice impact the people that changed or made a change, it was internal because they wanted to do it. We took the classes because no one pushed me to do anything. Got tired of something, but everyone don't get tired. And as far as like how they should be punished, I think they should be right along in there with them. No protective custody or anything. The higher the ranking, the closer you need to be to population. So I think they need to be right along in there with them because for some reason we forget that that guy that's incarcerated is a version of you. Like we're all different versions of a human. And that's what all of this have taught me. Like, I am a version of everything. So I think they should be right along in there with them.
Thank you. So we got 2 more questions, and then we're gonna get ready for Q&A. I wanted to ask Kristen, how do you think COs contribute to trauma and mental health triggers? And just in your work with Going Inside, do you have any opinions of how you think COs contribute to the trauma and the mental health triggers that folk have?
Oh, definitely. I'm just gonna be pretty candid. A lot of correctional officers are bullies. I'm gonna go on a limb and say some of them were bullied in school, and what they're able to do when they put their uniform on is it's almost like what they're doing to incarcerated people is what they wish they did to the group of guys coming down the hall that used to do it to them. You know, like there was even I'm from a small town, Forsyth, Monroe County, and there was a video that went viral kind of in the Jackson area of this cop going crazy and doing the most and being extra. And it was a guy I went to school with, graduated with. And all I saw watching that video was, you wish you had did this to the guys that I watched do this to you and punk you around all throughout school. And now that you have on this uniform and you have a gang of people with you that have on a uniform as well, who are going to cover it up or, you know, change the story or go whatever you're saying, you now feel like you have the power to exert over other people, whether it's warranted or unwarranted, and it's never warranted in my opinion. But I think a lot of them are people that were bullied who now get to bully. I think it's power trips that they take, the way that they treat persons, and like Dominique said, we're versions of each other. And I think that I really think that a lot of these men and women go into the facilities and they see an opportunity to do something they weren't able to do when they probably wanted to do it most, like in high school. They see a chance to be influential in a place where they probably are not influential in other areas of their life. If we're just going to call a spade. So speaking to the people that I've spoken with, it's the same story every time. The guards are bringing in the drugs. That's true. I mean, because when you think about it, everyone that comes into a facility is getting searched, right? If you're patting us down, you're going through metal detectors, how do we still have large numbers of incarcerated people dying from overdoses? Where are the drugs coming from? If it ain't me, because I'm getting patted down, where is it coming from? It's y'all, because y'all have your homies and your homegirls and whoever else you're on shift with helping y'all bring this stuff in, getting a kickback. Hey, you help me on this shift. I might give you 10% off top. You know, what you think, you know? And then they know that no one is going to believe incarcerated persons when they go and say, hey, it's them, they're doing it, because the stigma already is, we're going to go anti-incarcerated person. We're going to, you know, not believe y'all are bad people. Forget what y'all say. And so when you have a culture that doesn't value the voices of incarcerated people, and then you have a culture that allows for a lack of accountability and correctional officers to come in and do what they want, this is what happens. This is what gets created. This is what manifests itself.
Thank you. And it's weird because, especially if you have a mental illness, they already are not going to believe some of the stuff that you got going on. And it's ironic that right now, as a person with a felony, couldn't go into a prison to apply for a job because they'll say you are less reliable, you're more of a liability. When in fact, all the folks stealing and doing wrong is the ones who didn't have a record at first, who passed the background check to get in your prison to do the dirt. So it's definitely some challenges. So we have one more question, and then Nikki has a comment, or did you want to comment now, Nikki?
I know this question was for one of our panelists who unfortunately weren't able to make it tonight, and she was going to speak on the mental health side. And I'm just listening to this great conversation, and thank you all, and everybody in the chat is making a lot of great comments. And I'm trying to stay reserved because I'm getting hot too. And I'm just listening to Dominique and I'm just saying, preach, you know, because I'm like, you know, because you're saying things that I know so true. And I'm just going to just throw this in. And I know I have sisters on the line that also who I spent some time with at Pulaski. And I'm thinking about the article that came out maybe some months ago. And, you know, Pulaski State Prison, you know, we have two. major prison for women. We have Lear, and then we have Pulaski. And Pulaski, by far, according to this AJC article, is the worst staff prison, right? And Kirsten knows that you're going to be going into Pulaski soon, and so you'll see what we're talking about. Staffing wise, the ratio of staff to the incarcerated folks that are there. I'm just going to be real honest with you. There's nobody there. Their COs are just like they're not there. So folks are running the dorms themselves. And when we got friends who tell us, they're like, Nick, they'll call us and say, there's nobody down here. There's no security. So we know what's happening. So Pulaski, who we all know is called the Pink Palace because it's a cute prison. It's cute on the outside, it's well manicured, it's beautiful, right? It's where they're going to take the commissioner and they're going to go, and that's the place you want them to go. You don't want to go to Arendelle. You're going to go to Pulaski because it looks nice, right? But with that being said, they have a way to, you know how you clean up house. But there are a lot of things that are going on behind that wall that that I think in this panel we wanted to talk, you know, about a lot of things. And I can just say this. When we talked about the mental health part of it, when you asked that question, I thought about my time when I worked in education. And I don't know if my friend Robin is still on the line, but we worked in education for years. And I remember when I had a student, and one day she came and put her books on the desk, and she turned in all of her stuff. I taught GED math, and very good student, you know, excellent, young. I mean, she could probably go in and pass that test on the first try. She just wanted to go to school just to get out the dorm. Because, you know, people get into, you know, go to education just to get out the dorm. Because, you know, we were in the high rises, was going to be on lockdown. So you go to education just to get out. You know, you just want to hell just to get out the dorm because you didn't want to be on lockdown or get past inspection. So, but she came in one day and put all of her books on the desk, and she said, Miss Nikki, I'm going to lockdown. That's what we call it, you know, because she'd been trying to speak to a counselor. And she felt that, and a lot of individuals who are incarcerated feel that's the only way they can get help if you go to lockdown. Because, you know, if you go to lockdown, that you're going to see a warden or you're going to see somebody in security. They have to make rounds. Unlike if you're in certain dorms, nobody is going down to certain dorms. You're not going to see a CO. You're not going to see, they're not coming down there. But if you go to lockdown, there are certain staff that they have to do rounds. So that was her only out. So when we talk about the mental health, I guess I just wanted to share that's what happens a lot in, that's what I can't speak to Arendelle. I served my time at Pulaski. A lot of the ladies would do that, or individuals who we would call cutters. They would do whatever you can tell. If you look at someone's arm, you can tell by the stripes they have on their arms what they've gone through just to say, I'm crying out for help. Or stand on a building. Anybody who served time at Pulaski, we have low rises. So it's nothing for a lady to stand up a building. And I promise you, they can put many statements in to say, I need to get help. But if you stand on that building, hell, everybody coming and they get help that way. So the cries out for help have to come in enormous ways, and it's sad. But I guess I shared that story because my student committed suicide while she was in lockdown. And that was her cry for help. And it's unfortunate. And that's what happens a lot of times in a lot of facilities, but I know it happens at Pulaski. And I'm just being transparent that's the mental health that happens because the lack of staff, the lack of trained staff, and quite honest, staff COs, they will say, look, we're not equipped to handle what's happening. So I just wanted to share that's what's happening on the mental health when you asked the question. And I just wanted to share that story. So
thank you so very much. And so what we're going to do, I wanted to ask one last question, but we really want to get some questions in Q&A. We had some being dropped in. One of the last questions I wanted to ask, and if somebody could take maybe 1 minute to kind of ask that, whether you want to jump in. Are there any accommodations made to improve the social and physical development outcomes for girls who are isolated from the general population. Okay. I haven't really experienced anything, so I know I really couldn't speak on that. So I don't know if anybody that may be on the chat, but if you have the answer to that, drop it in the chat. If there are any accommodations that are made to improve social and physical development outcomes for girls who are isolated from the general population, drop it in the chat. We love to hear that. And thank you. At this time, we're going to get ready for Q&A. Thank our lovely panel, Kristen Wilder of Southern Center for Human Rights, Dominique Harris of Georgia Justice Project, as well as Drew Umberger, great advocate in the community with PAD. We love you, love you, love you. So at this time, we're going to open up the Q&A. Nikki, did you want to do that? Before we open up the Q&A, I did just drop in the chat about next week's Justice Day events, the upcoming Justice Day events. And I think someone did put in a question about how can we work together to dismantle the privatization of the prison system? Who are the power brokers behind the privatization of the prison systems? It's the folks who ain't locked up. People who are profiting from it. I mean, literally, you can go on your stock and go in and they have some type of financial stake in it. And one of those things is to join us at the Capitol on Justice Day, which is an annual event where advocates, family members, individuals converge onto the Capitol. We'll be in Atlanta this year. Drop the link in the chat. It is a free half-day event where you come out and you will be networking with other organizations doing this work, formerly incarcerated leaders like myself and Dominique and Drew and Nikki and plenty on this call where we are doing this work. Where there are going to be several folks. We'd love to encourage you all to not only join our upcoming Talk Justice Tuesdays, but also to join us at Justice Day, but also speak on issues. Year when you're talking about a lot of people probably involved and getting more involved, we wouldn't have had this bill that's passing about bail. But I think because folks haven't been making enough noise about it, holding their elected officials accountable, they do things like that. And I think they need to be reminded that you all work for us. We elected you in, we can elect you out. And when you don't do that, I think they play games with us and our family members, because most of the folks who this will impact, this new law, look like me and you. So you got to definitely use your voice for things like that. So did we have, Nikki, did you want to moderate the Q&A?
I was going back through the chat. I think you answered the question in the Q&A about the privatization of the prison system. I was trying to go back through.
And there was one question. Somebody said they thought slavery was illegal. They did use the word prisoners, and we don't use that word. But people in prison, I wanted to answer that live because I felt like it was something other folks might be on this call who were confused and thinking that slavery is not legal. Slavery is still legal in Georgia and in most of the states. Slavery did not end with the 13th Amendment because there's an exception in the 13th Amendment that says slavery is illegal, except if you're convicted for the punishment of a crime. So this is the driver of mass incarceration. And that was rooted out of when Abraham Lincoln, well, I guess that was him, did that and said, we're going to free the slaves. All the slaves lost their mind. Who we going to get to do this for free? They lost their mind. We're going to let our free slaves go. So they started coming up with ways to start locking up Black folks, which is what they're doing today with these bail bills, all these little things. It's the same thing. They created these things called Black codes, which made it illegal for a Black person to be unemployed, for them to walk on grass. Every little thing they could come up to give you a felony to get you locked up. So now you can say, oh, we got our slaves, but we got to give them a felony first. So yes, I just want to make sure that was clear, that slavery is indeed still legal. And if you are interested in working with us on this issue, the All of Us in Georgia chapter here is working to have that law amended in Georgia where it says slavery is illegal, period. So we'll make sure we drop that information in the chat. And I think there's one in the Q&A, Nikki.
That's the one you answered about the
okay.
Who are the power brokers behind the privatization of the prison system?
Who do you think are the power brokers, Nikki? Like to be more specific.
Well, it says, what can we do to dismantle the privatization of the prison and the power brokers behind that, basically.
Buy the prison and tear it down.
That's right.
I mean, really, that's the only way to do it.
I think you have to
But-
outlaw, first of all, private prisons. I think there should never be a private prison, a privately owned prison. But when you look at, when you talk about power brokers, we got to go to our legislator, because a lot of these private prisons are doing something called donating to campaigns.
Ooh,
Donating to campaigns, paying for breakfast, dinner, lunch. If you pass this bill, if you put that substitute in the bill for me, these people are making money, and then they're spending that money on our legislators. And this is something I looked up last legislative session. I won't say who the representative was that disappointed me in one of the committee meetings, but he said something very pro-prison. And so I looked into his campaign donations, and lo and behold, one of the private prisons in Georgia, one of the companies that owns a private prison in Georgia, was one of his campaign donors.
Mm.
go
So
figure.
if anyone is as curious as I am, I just shared a link. You can look up every legislator's campaign donation. They are required by law to file those every election cycle, and you can see that a lot of these people that own these private prisons are in their pockets. They need campaign dollars, they need campaign signs, and they are willing to sell us out to do it.
So it looks like we have one more time for one more question.
You have two more in the Q&A.
Oh, okay, there we go.
It says, in your experience, are the chaplains allowed in the prisons? Dominique, you want to handle that question?
Yes. Matter of fact, like that was one of the first times I seen a formerly incarcerated individual come back in. He was a chaplain, his name Omar Howard. So a few of the chaplains that I'm in my experience in male prison. So yes, chaplains are allowed to come in prisons. That I know. Like each prison have their own chaplain, basically. And I know it's a chaplain for the whole GDC also.
Yes. And they are staff members. So there are chaplains that come inside of the prison. And maybe Kristen can answer this. Who are the specific congressmen responsible for the bail bill? And how can we identify them and bring in pressure on our representatives to stand up against this?
So the lead sponsor, I don't know every single sponsor, but the lead sponsor is Representative Randy Robertson, who, if you look further into him, he has his hands, lead sponsorship, co-sponsorship in a lot of our crime bills that have been going through Georgia in the legislative session. He is also the chair of the Senate subcommittee that is investigating the Fulton County Jail. So Randy Robertson is who you can absolutely look at and look into for why we keep having several of our bills. Actually, like I said, if you look into his individual profile on the Georgia legislator website, you will see his name attached to several crime bills and criminal related bills. As far as bringing pressure on them, this is my second legislative session, and this is unfortunate to say, but it's just the honest truth. A lot of them have marching orders, is what I call it. They have their marching orders. They have what, the governor wants them to carry out for session, and that's what they're going to do. I've watched people, experts bring facts, figures, statistics. I've watched actually impacted persons give tearful, please don't do this. And if you watch the floor today before they pass it in the House, more of the same, people being honest about what this bill is going to do, who is going to do it to, but they still passed it. I can't say that someone like Randy Robertson would care. I can't say that most of them would care about any of the bills they're doing. Like I said, they have their marching orders for the session. Cry as you may, but they have always been committed to carrying out their marching orders from what I've seen, no matter what anyone else thinks about it, unfortunately.
There is an organization, and actually put it in the chat, that address issues like this. And they have a tip line. It's called the Human and Civil Rights Coalition of Georgia. They actually have a tip line, and it is an anonymous tip line for you to report any type of, inhumane conditions and prison conditions and things like that. And I am looking for, I'm looking for the right now, so I can give it to you. And so if you, whether it's abuse, prison conditions, I want to drop that information in the chat so that you could have that. And it is anonymous. And Kirsten, are you able to pull up that bill, or that somebody just dropped it? Okay, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I just dropped it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I believe one of the attendees wanted to see who voted and how they, do we still have that link to send?
So I don't know if they haven't put up the House votes just yet. I do have a picture.
Yeah, I have the pic
they
that they
voted?
sent us today. You still have that? You need me to send
Yes.
that to
How do
you?
can I email it to you, and are you able to share screen?
Well,
Or
we can share it, and or if you have it, I mean, Waleisah, if you can send it to
You can
Waleisah,
send it to
I have it
me.
on my phone. Okay.
Yeah.
And somebody asked a question why Kristen is doing that. How many private prisons that they have in Georgia? You have that information?
If it's one, it's too many.
Yeah, and supposedly, what was it, 2 years, 3 years ago, they were talking about building 3 new private prisons. And if you'll notice, a lot of times when people say, what is it that we can do? Most of these prisons are in little small hick towns. And that's what they're doing. They do that. And a lot of folks don't know that folks in prison are counted in the census. So if you have a small town that's about 900 folks, but they've got 6,000 people in their prison, those 6,000 people count towards the census. But what do you get with the census? You get money. Again, this is a way to make money off bodies in prison. So that's why they hold on to those little things, and it takes jobs away from folks. So that's why when you see these little small towns like Sylvester and all these times, these high unemployment rates, they're going to keep high employment rates as long as they have prisons in those towns, because as long as people can work slaves, you're not going to get a job digging ditches or doing the work that incarcerated people are doing. So all of this stuff is a domino effect, and it takes our voices to make that known that no, you're not going to bring another prison here in our town. We don't want a prison in our town. We keep those jobs. So yes, those little small towns, if you think about every prison here, they're in small towns. And if you live in Fulton County, born and raised, but you have been out in Alto or wherever Alto's at, Oglethorpe, Georgia, you are being counted in Oglethorpe, Georgia census. So how is it that you are an incarcerated person, but your body is being counted in the census, but I can't vote from prison to say who I think should be in my child's school board, or I can't vote and do these things, and I'm not being treated with the dignity that I deserve. So I just want to leave that for y'all to think on. You have something you want to send me, Kristen? You did?
Yeah, we sent you the picture just
Yeah, I
because
sent it.
if they wanted to see a visual, somebody wanted to see it.
Okay. Here we go. So the reds are okay. So the yays are 97, the nays were 69. So this is this most recent bill.
This was SB 63 earlier, the cash bail bill. So red is
wanted
no.
that bill to pass, and 69 said no.
Correct. 97 said yes.
So the reds are no's, right?
Yes, reds are no's. And I think someone's looking for a specific. Barton voted yes, whoever
Barton
that
voted yes, yes.
Bart who?
Barton.
Barton voted yes.
And where you see E next to someone's name and they didn't vote, that's a representative that wasn't present during the vote. So like you see for Schofield, Scott, Stenson, Stoner, those are representatives that weren't present to cast their vote.
Well, thank you. This has been very enlightening. Again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this call. We'd like to thank our panelists. If anyone, since we did not do it, feel free to drop your information in the chat, your contact information, Dominique, and anybody, if you felt like that's what you want to do or connect with on socials. Again, please join us for next week's Talk Justice Tuesday, which is on what, Nikki?
February 20th.
I'm saying the topic.
Reentry, overcoming barriers.
Overcoming barriers to reentry. And that will be next week. On the 20th at
week
the
after
same
next.
time.
Week after next.
What is that?
Ooh, and there's a lot of barriers too to overcome.
Yes, yes. And hopefully we'll see you all registering for Justice Day at the Capitol. And for those of you who are on the call and may not live in the Metro Atlanta area, if you're outside of the Metro Atlanta area when you register, it does have a question that asks you if you need transportation assistance. I know last year and a couple years before then, I provided transportation from Columbus to get folks to the Capitol and back home to Columbus. So if you're outside of that, make sure that you indicate on that you needed transportation assistance. We would love to have you all join us on the 27th. I think it's going to be very inspiring, as it is always every year, and it gets you activated to be able to use your voice. Thank you all so much.
All right.